Hi, I'm Tim Mosso, and welcome to Watchbox Reviews and Weekend Watches. Have you had your fill of the Lange und Söhne Odysseus? No? Well, I have a table full of sports watches so you can get your daily allotment of steel as recommended by the FDA. I've also got gold, I've also got platinum, I've also got titanium. And remember, everything here is for sale. Prices in the description for all of these watches, and you will want those prices because we are looking at extremes this week. Everyone who joined me at Watch Time New York yesterday, thank you. It was awesome. Send me the selfies, send me the wrist shots of us together, and they will make my Monday show. Now let's throw all in with the most extreme Rolex I've depicted on this program in quite some time. Launched at Baselworld 2007, there were 3 jeweled GMTs, the SA with sapphires and diamonds, the SARU, also known as the red, white, and blue Patriot, and this, the SANR. Absolutely paved with baguette and brilliant cut diamonds of lug, links, and bezel. The watch also includes black sapphires to replace the numerals on the bezel, and it is a white gold bezel on a white gold GMT Master. You can see the green GMT script is still present, but we now have a white gold GMT hand. This is technically reference 116759 SANR. It has incredible mass, and don't throw, because this is factory. Hold the rotten vegetables, guys. I know this is going to be very controversial because it's almost antithetical to the purists' notion of what a Rolex sports watch should be, but there is no compromise. Still 100 meters water resistant, COSC chronometer, and of course, this timepiece with 2 independent time zones and a bezel that remains useful in spite of its, shall we say, rather baroque adornment. On my wrist, 16 centimeters in circumference. This is probably the watch of the 3 jeweled GMTs that a guy would most prefer, at least a guy of traditional tastes in watches. If you are all about steel and, well, let's say less gems being better, no gems being best, I think this is probably the full gem-paved GMT you're going to want because it's low in profile. It's all silver and black, and that is a sharp two-tone contrast. Would I wear it? On occasion. Would it necessarily be my first choice? No. That said, this is one of the few truly handmade Rolex watches that you will find. These watches hail from Geneva, from Rolex's gem setting studios, and short of gem setting, there's not a whole lot of traditional craft art being practiced at Rolex. So if you want Rolex reliability and cachet with something approaching independent horology, attention to detail, and hand finishing, you want this watch. Now, let's detox a little bit. Let's go with a more traditional Rolex watch. In fact, let's go with a more traditional Rolex watch and its great rival. I have here on the table the 2017 Sea-Dweller 43 and from Blancpain, the 50 Fathoms 5015, but with full X71 bracelet. Now, the Blancpain is a 5-day power reserve stainless steel 45mm. It features a sapphire capped bezel, as you can see, with a lovely cambered sapphire, so the bezel is fully loomed. Now, the Rolex, by the way, this watch came out in 2007, so it's a veteran in the segment. The Rolex is a 2017 launch, and you can already see that there's quite a bit that's different about this one compared to the Blancpain, but also different compared to other Rolex divers. First, in order to reference the 1967 Sea-Dweller, the very first, because this was the 50th anniversary watch, we have both a single red script on the dial, because the first red Sea-Dweller was a single red, and then we have a matte finish to the dial base that looks very different from the gloss lacquer you'll see on the conventional Deep Sea and Submariner. So this watch is a little bit different aesthetically. 43mm in diameter, the watch features a ceramic bezel cap, and I'm going to do a bezel comparison right now so you can hear and you can judge. Let me know in the comments below which bezel you prefer. The Sea-Dweller. And now, the Nifty 50. That was thunderous, wasn't it? I have to say, while the Rolex is more refined, the 50 Fathoms was a hell of a lot more mechanical, and I preferred the 50. Now, the timepiece is interesting because, of course, the 50 Fathoms, spurred by a request from French servicemen Bob Maloubier and also Claude Riffaut, inspired Jean-Jacques Victor of Blancpain to effectively create the first modern format dive watch in '53. It beat the Submariner to market by a few months, and it's been a classic ever since. Now, this watch is glam. It's big. It's bold. It has an original retail price on the bracelet of $17,000, and you can see why. It's high horology finish outside and in. You can't see the movement, but take my word for it. You can see the bracelet, the X71 with interlocking links with countersink so that there are no gaps between them. Hardly any play whatsoever. And you can see through the bottom, there are just a few slots on the underside to vent the wrist. Now, there's a double fold deployant, so there's no dive extension, and that's where the Rolex has a little bit of an advantage. But inside the case, and there is a soft iron inner cage, Milgauss style, 3 mainspring barrels, caliber 1315, free sprung, 4 hertz beat rate, 35 joules, 5 position adjustment. It is just as accurate as the COSC certified Rolex, and again, you've got that 5-day power reserve. Now, the Rolex caliber 3235 has a 70-hour power reserve. Throw it on the wrist, it's got a different look than the 50 Fathoms because it is a little bit thinner and it is a little bit more spare. At 43 millimeters, you can see the watch is large. It's certainly oversized, or at least it's knocking on the gate to oversized. The watch has an incredible clasp featuring both a glide lock system, and you can see internally, Andrew's going to show you the inside of the clasp. You have 20 millimeters of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, and then you can see there's also a flip lock extension system, so you have what we would call 2 inches in the old colonies, everywhere else about 50 millimeters. Now, the 50 Fathoms is an impressive piece on the wrist. 45 millimeters doesn't lie, and it's all of high polish too, so it's got a little bit of a more boisterous, extravagant, and decadent appearance for a dive watch. What I love is that the bezel's fully loomed at night, and by day I find the broadsword style hands that taper to a point to be more visible. Now, we're sticking with the dive watch theme here. We're going for bigger is better, though not necessarily heavier. That's not what you get from the 2015 model of the Omega Seamaster 1200 meter Ploprof. Now, a few things changed for 2015. The original revived Ploprof arrived 2 years after the Omega Mania auction in 2009. It played on the nostalgia for some of these more obscure vintage Omega sports pieces. It is larger than the original Ploprof, but the changes from 2009 include the absence of a date for a cleaner dial, a sandblasted solid titanium dial, a ceramic insert for the bezel, and of course a titanium case with a display case back so you can see caliber 8, 9, 12 through the back. Twin mainspring barrels, coaxial chronometer, and it features, yes, 1200 meter water resistance and a 60-hour power reserve. It also features a helium escape valve hiding under the flank of the case. The original Ploprof was said to be immune to intrusion by helium. No ingress, no need for egress. It did not include a helium escape valve. This one does. Now, the timepiece is 48 millimeters from lug to lug, meaning it's actually shorter across the wrist than almost any watch on the table today, with only a few smaller dress watches being the exception. The watch is 55 millimeters across, however, and 18.5 millimeters thick, but it is feather light in titanium, and I'm going to show you perhaps the most entertaining element of the watch, which is when you press the plunger, you unlock the bi-directional rotating bezel. When you release the plunger, it is locked in place. The crown features its own plunger system, so when you screw it out, there are pillars that slide along internal tracks that brace the outer crown guard, protecting it from blows, and that's how you access the setting functions of the watch. Now, the bracelet, which Omega calls shark-proof, is all of polished grade 5 titanium. The case of the watch, likewise grade 5, very supple. It looks massive and brutal, but it feels anything but, almost like silk. And we talked about the Rolex's features. Well, the Omega matches it. As you can see, the Omega features a fold-out extension internally, but then it beats the glide lock system by implementing a push-button slider, and the push-button slider allows you to move the clasp internally, so you can incrementally adjust using that slider, and you can push the button to do so. There's no need to yank and crank as you have to with the conventional glide lock system. This is actually a better clasp overall than what you get with the Rolex, and it features twin trigger release, so it's solid and secure. Seamaster 1200 meter. Throw it on the wrist. I have to say it wears quite easily. For such an imposing thing, you would expect it to be absolutely overwhelming, but take a look. You can actually see that there's plenty of space on either side of my wrist because it's only 48 millimeters side to side. It wears easily. Continuing with the dive watch theme, I want to emphasize that I do appreciate value, and 40.5 millimeters in stainless steel, the 2012 Ball Skin Diver is exactly that. Technically part of the Engineer family. It's based on a watch from 1962, and it's quite faithful in many regards. With the exception of the somewhat quirky Day Date, which I actually find quite practical, the watch features no crown guard in vintage form, a rather slender case profile with a wonderful cambered arc and a handsome bevel along its mid-case profile. There is a fully loomed bezel with a ceramic insert, unidirectional, and you have tritium tracers or self-activating beta emitters that phosphoresce without any need to be charged on the dial. So that's a unique feature that is a unique selling point of Ball. And you'll also appreciate that we get a mesh bracelet here as well, and it is a remarkably deluxe piece as the removable links are fixed by screws, belying its price point, which is exceptional. Again, you're going to want to check the prices in the description. Now, the clasp features a clamshell system and a relatively robust construction, although it's stamped, it's of a thicker gauge than stamped Rolex, and you can see there is an internal fold-out dive extension, as well as 3 divots drilled inside the clasp to change the anchoring point. Throw it on the wrist and the watch is wonderfully wearable. At about 14 millimeters thick and 50 millimeters lug to lug, it wears comfortably thanks to that lace-like micro-link bracelet. Easy to wear and quite comfortable. It's also practical with 300-meter water resistance, the unidirectional rotating bezel that is just a wonderful surrogate for a chronograph, and a handsome vintage-inspired look that appears as fresh today as it did when it bowed back in 2012. And finally, the high horology entry in our diver classification for today, and this really is like the Olympics of luxury dive watches opening this show today. Launched in 2018, this is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Diver in turquoise. That's right, turquoise, gloss lacquered mega tapisserie dial, gloss turquoise, diving reference ring, and internal bezel. You have polymer shoulders for the bezel adjuster as well as the crown, and then a matching turquoise cut and hand-finished diver-style frosted strap. Now throw it on the wrist. You can see it's built on the 42mm stainless steel offshore platform. 300 meters water resistant. This is reference 15710ST. So 15710ST. That means it is the Royal Oak Offshore Diver with a display case back. So you can see the 60-hour power reserve automatic winding AP reference 3120. Full balance bridge with a free-sprung index for shock resistance and a 22-karat mass with the coats of arms of Audemars and Piguet families, reminding you AP is the oldest manufacturer in Switzerland, still run and owned by the founding families. Now, the timepiece is relatively slender as offshores go. At about 14 millimeters thick, you're going to find this one wears relatively low on the wrist, and it fits fairly easily, though make no mistake, it's 54 millimeters from lug to lug, so this is a big boy. If you're wondering how that internal dive bezel works and you haven't seen one of these in action before, let me quickly demonstrate. It is an internal ratcheting system. You line up the interior of the bezel, which is loomed, by the way, with the minute hand. Now you have an impromptu 0 to 60 minute timer. Again, who needs a chronograph when you've got a scale this visible? I rarely time anything over an hour with a chronograph anyway. Okay, let's talk about our dress watches, our all-arounders, and our independents. Let's start with something that is truly out of this world. To infinity and beyond, we touch the stars with the 2018 Bethune DB25 Starry Various, featuring an extraordinary fire-blued titanium dial. This is a blued titanium process that Bethune has patented, so it is exclusive to the brand. You will not see it anywhere else. Now, not only is the dial mirror polished before it's blued, but you can see a combination of hand-applied rose gold cabochon have been installed to create the image of the stars, and then there is gold leaf across the center, creating the image of the Milky Way. You have outboard toroidal ring with our indices and rose gold modified Breguet-style hands. The watch features a crown that's a work of art in its own right. You can see it features a number of drilled dimples on its profile. It is double knurled. Let's move those hands out of the way so you can see them more clearly. And look at the discretion. They do not advertise nearly enough at De Bethune of L'Auberson, Switzerland. They need a bigger marquee than that. They've earned it, but what taste. Keeping the name of the company small on this canvas to let the art speak for itself. Now, the watch is 42 millimeters, and it's in titanium, so it's feather light. And if you're not a DB28 floating lug dial side escapement type guy, this is going to be the watch for you. 9 millimeters thick titanium, easy to wear, a more conventional case shape with the DB25 design. Lovely, exquisite, but not necessarily the most boisterous or brash. This is a timepiece that's beautiful, but it becomes more so the closer you get. It's to be appreciated under a loupe, and on both sides at that. You can see caliber 2005 features hand-finished steel bridges. Now, they have been not just hand-finished, they have been black polished. This is a finish you generally see on screws. You see it on regulators. You're not used to seeing it on an entire movement, but that's what you get from De Bethune. Now you get the same mirrored finish on the balance bridge, you get the same mirrored finish on the base plate, and you can see that there is a triple parachute system, shock protection, shock protection, shock protection, with the shock protection system, the hairspring, the titanium and white gold proprietary balance, and the silicon escape wheel, all designed in-house. Everything here, right down to the twin self-adjusting barrels, proprietary and patented, and the watch features an exquisite manual wind 6-day power reserve. They don't short you the material, even giving you alligator on the underside of the strap as well as the top. These guys do their homework, and the results pay dividends for the owner. Arguably the best independent going, 150 pieces a year, all models combined. That said, I really only want one of their models. Close to the top of my grail list, and one of the watches I will buy when I'm back in the game. This model was launched in 2012. This is the DB28 Digital. Now, it features the DB28's classical spring-loaded floating lugs. We're approaching the GPHG for 2019, and it should be noted that the DB28 won overall the Aiguille d'Or in 2011. So this is a descendant mechanically and aesthetically of a grand prize winner. Now, what changes for the DB28 Digital is that you get a 45mm grade 5 titanium case. It's only 12mm thick, so don't be fooled. It's the aspect ratio that makes it look thicker. But the watch features those variable geometry floating lugs. You can get them large or small. These are the larger lugs. A lovely rose lathe glandauge, or barleycorn pattern, guilloche cut onto the dial at center, a spherical moon phase surrounded by that blued titanium set with rose gold stars, and you can see that there is a digital jumping hour and a scrolling minutes display. You also have another image of the cosmos over the minutes. I am going to demonstrate how the bullhead setting system allows you to play relentlessly, and you know that you will, with the jump hour mechanism. Now, the watch features the same base caliber that you just saw in the DB25. Screw down that lovely bullhead style crown, and now we can take a look at the case back, and the case back is spectacular. Different finishing here, Côte de Bethune. They are a rich and narrower, somewhat more darkly crested version of Geneva Waves, and you can see a few things change here. You have the same general architecture. You have a 5-day power reserve because of the extraordinary power drawn by the jump hour complication. I should mention the moon phase need be adjusted only once every 122 years. You could see that the balance bridge is fired blue right here. It's still mirror polished, and there is a mirror anglage on the edge of every bridge, so you're not getting sold short of traditional finish. It's just a different look. You could see that the balance wheel is the 2010 patent balance wheel, whereas the one on the DB25 is a more conventional wheel. This is a solid disc of silicon with a white gold rim. You have that same two-part sort of dog-leg kinked proprietary hairspring, and you have the escape wheel also of silicon. Throw it on the wrist, it's a bigger watch, but it still wears easily because of the floating lugs and the titanium case. Again, I would order it in the smaller lugs. The big lugs are 53 to 58 millimeters as they flex across the wrist. The smaller lugs are 47 to 51. I would go with smaller, but even the big one wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Now let's jump away from independence and honor a major group product that deserves recognition. Launched in 2000 in 250 pieces, this was the very first Lange und Söhne Lange 1 Tourbillon. It is a Lange 1, 38.5 millimeters in rose gold, but it features a caliber L9611 with a black polished and skeletonized dial side tourbillon bridge. You can also see a diamond capstone used on both sides. 49 diamonds, or I should say 49 synthetic rubies in this watch, and 2 real diamonds. You can see the other one is on the reverse side. You have twin half bridges, and you can see a lovely spiral pocket watch style wheel architecture used for this Baroque Saxon complication. Still a 3-day power reserve, and still what you expect from Lange. 2, not not one, freehand engraved half bridges, lovely wheel architecture, 3/4 bridge, jewels and chaton, gold and German silver, nickel, copper, zinc alloy used for the bridges and plates, engine turning on the base plate, and you can see a mirrored anglage on the edge of every bridge. The watch is easy to wear, and it beats away at 21.6 with that lovely dial side tourbillon. It also has a large date complication and a power reserve indicator, and the timepiece is a Lange classic. The watch was released in both platinum and rose gold, of which the rose is easily the warmer of the two. This is a timepiece for all time, whether you need to read the time or not. It's just a masterpiece that you almost wish you could wear upside down. Well, you can't quite, but the good news is you can take it off the wrist. And Lange gives the world the best pin buckle ever engineered, with a suspended bridge over its prongs so the strap sits inside the buckle rather than stacking up underneath. Look at that, they thought of everything. And there's a retaining bar inside the pin buckle to prevent it from getting stuck on smaller wrists when you use a smaller hole on the strap. They thought of everything. They even thought of those who like compound complications. Maybe a power reserve, a grand date, and a tourbillon isn't tech enough for you. Well, for those, there is the 556-piece 45 jewel caliber L952 in the Datograph Perpetual, launched in 2006 and made in this form, platinum, until 2011. The model you see here is 41 millimeters in diameter and about 14 millimeters thick. Now you can see that Lange double finish with polish and satin on the case flank, and it's impressive because not only is it a perpetual calendar chronograph, it's a perpetual calendar flyback chronograph, and the dial itself is made of sterling silver and then galvanized gray. You can see there's a flange outboard bearing the tachymeter scale, adding depth to a dial that needs no additional richness. The moon phase disc itself is made of solid gold. Turn it all over, and one might say gold of another manner in the caliber L952. You could see the lateral clutch moving around. You could see the column wheel, the levers and horns of the system, the recentering hammers, the bridge for the chronograph architecture, and of course, larger than on the tourbillon, an enormous freehand engraved half bridge. Overcoil hairspring beaten away at 18K. It has a 5-position adjustment like a chronometer and thus very precise, but it is a power-intensive machine, and thus manual wind 36-hour power reserve. You're going to have to wind it daily, but you really care? A brilliant system that allows you to adjust the perpetual calendar in sync. When you use the pusher adjuster on the case flank, everything adjusts coordinated, so if you fall a few days behind, you can quickly get back in the game without setting the complications individually. It even features lume, a watch that gives you everything you could want, and at 41 millimeters, though it's large, it's not oversized. Would I wear it? Do you have to ask? The timepiece fits well thanks to short cropped and stubby downturned lugs, though in platinum you really feel the mass of this massive class. Okay, now we're going to talk about some simpler watches, but we're sticking on the German side of the border. We're still in Saxony. We're going across town to the original Lange und Söhne, the company that today is known as Glashütte Original. Now, the 60s collection launched in 2006 and the 60s Iconic launched in 2015, but the model you see here is a one-year special edition for the 2019 model year. The annual series, multifaceted orange dégradé dial, stamped in Pforzheim at Glashütte's own dial manufacture using a 60-ton press. It is then galvanized yellow. It is then lacquered with a combination of black lacquer outboard and an orange reddish lacquer to create that gradient from the center outboard. The dial itself is cambered and domed, and you can see that it has a texture and a depth that is uncommon to conventional sunburst. This is a wonderfully ornate and deep dial, right down to the etched indices. You can see the 60s, swinging 60s, style quarter Arabics, as well as 60s inspired case lines and thin baton hands. But what really gets me is the three-dimensional quality of these etched indices that cut into the dial, giving it additional depth, and the base of the cut is then mirror finished by hand. 39 millimeters in stainless steel, powered by a GUB. That is the communist era name of the company, GUB, caliber 39, which is of modern architecture. High beat movement, 28.8, 40-hour power reserve. Throw it on the wrist. You can see it's a lovely thing. Under 10 millimeters thick, it's 9.4 millimeters thick, and it sits low. And at 39 millimeters, you can see it'll fit any wrist, even as it has the personality of something thoroughly oversized. You would need a 48 millimeter Hublot to make this kind of visual statement, and I don't think the statement would be in equal taste to this Glashütte, a little giant that punches above its weight and destined to be a rare piece. 1 year production only only, with over 6 individual steps, all of them principally manual in the creation of the dial. The only real automated step is the 60-ton press right at the beginning. So, a handcrafted watch. Now let's talk about something that is entirely different from any we've discussed today. Let's talk about a watch that will force you to do a double take, because this watch is double-sided. Yes, it's a non-round watch, which means it's already a bit of a connoisseur's piece, but this new for $19.99 JLC Reverso Grand Tie Night and Day is a compound complication with a 42-hour power reserve. It's actually 45, if I recall correctly. 45-hour power reserve, of which 40 are calibrated, an AM/PM night and day indicator, a moon phase, and then a small second coaxial. The watch is 26 millimeters wide by 42 millimeters lug to lug. And remember, being a Reverso, it has a rotating case, but unlike the original polo Reversos made for polo players in India in the 1930s, this one does not feature a solid case back, rather another display of the movement, exquisitely executed, built and shaped for the case. A manufactured JLC product, they make both the movement and the case for the watch, beautifully adorned with Côte de Genève. You can also see that it features true fire annealed, that is kiln-blued screws with that lovely, rich cobalt metallic. Throw it on the wrist. You can see this watch features JLC's second generation deployant clasp. You know it's second generation because when you open it, it's internally blasted and polished with that channel down the center. Now you throw it on the wrist. It is a relatively easy watch to wear, as I've owned 2 Grand Tie case JLC Reversos. I had my Tourbillon and I had my dual time night and day. This is a watch that wears well on a smaller wrist. So if you want something that is the icon of its brand, you're going to want to get yourself an Omega Moon watch, a Patek Nautilus or Calatrava, a Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet, possibly a Daytona GMT or Submariner from Rolex, and you're going to want to buy yourself a JLC Reverso. If you're going to own just one, the Reverso is the one. But because there is no definitive Reverso, there have been so many models, you can find the one that speaks to you. If this is that watch, price in the description. Get moving. We can help. I also want to show you something cool. Prior to 2016, the chassis of the rotating case of the Reverso always featured an engine-turned perlage. After 2016, increasingly a sunray pattern. I liked the old perlage. It was a nostalgic vintage touch that dates back to the 1930s. Of course, the case, a precision instrument. You close it, you snap it, it feels sharp, it feels impressive, it feels like a proper industrial tool. It doesn't feel ropey. There is no play. It's always impressive, and JLC has always made them that way. When you find a Reverso case has too much play or it feels too tight, that's evidence of bad refinishing and reassembly. There are 50 parts in that case. Okay, let's talk about JLC, but for those with more traditional tastes who prefer round watches, this was launched in 2015. It is called the Master Ultra-Thin Moon. Now, to be fair, it's not just a moon phase. 3 hands with a radial date. You have a coaxial pointer-style date and a moon phase inboard. Stainless steel, 39 millimeters with a black galvanized sunburst-style applique indices, and you can see half-frosted Dauphine hands for better contrast on the black base. The watch is 9.9 millimeters thick, so fairly slender, and as you can see, the movement is nicely executed. A JLC manufacturer caliber automatic winding, 43-hour power reserve. It does feature hacking or stop seconds, and you can see those same rich Côte de Genève and fire-blued screws that we saw on the Reverso. Throw it on the wrist. It's a minimalist watch and a rather romantic one. Practical and romantic in equal measure. You have the practicality of a legible dial and a wearable size, but you also have the date. And well, for romantics, you've got that slick black and white look, case and dial, as well as the moon phase, which has been called the most poetic of complications. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, easy to wear, and trust me, wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, you're going to feel the same. All right, Patek Philippe. I don't have a whole lot of Patek on the table, but I picked one of my personal favorites. 36 millimeters is the perfect size for rose gold, and when you have a case design as strong as the officer's case from Patek Philippe, it helps to go with a smaller size. And that's exactly what you have in this Patek Philippe 5059R, part of a model series launched in 1993. This one features post-1995 hallmarks, so it's a bit newer. But the officer-style case is designed to evoke early 20th century pocket watch conversions, many of which were Patek Philippe's. You would start with a pocket watch, and then you would weld straight projecting lugs onto the flank. That's exactly what you have here, but the welded joint has been removed by hand. This is a hand-finished officer's watch. You would then have bars fitted using a screw system. So the bars would be held in place by screws because there were no spring bars at the time. And you would either have bars welded in and the strap sewn around the bar, or the bar fixed by a screw. And the screw is what we have here. The case shape is rotund and rather stubby, as you would find on a pocket watch. And as with most pocket watches converted, you would have a hinged hunter case back, revealing the works underneath. Now, the timepiece here features a perpetual calendar with retrograde driven by an automatic Patek Philippe manufactured caliber 315. You could see a mirror polished interior with the reference 5059 inside the case back, and a lot of folks, if they want to do an engraving, will do it inside the case back. The action is superbly smooth. It snaps shut. And on the dial side, you can see one of Patek Philippe's more inventive perpetual calendar registers. Now, it's a matte white. It's not silver. It is matte white. And you have the day, you have the month, you have the leap year indicator at center, and then you have a retrograde date with blackened leaf-style hands and a lovely blackened counterweight needle seconds hand in 36 millimeters with the officer's case style. The watch wears with a little bit of a vintage presence, as 36 millimeters for a men's dress complication is a little bit smaller than today. There is a 5159 today that's a 38 millimeter watch. This timepiece feels more natural to me. The lugs are so strong and the rose gold so powerful. I wouldn't want it in a larger case. I prefer the smaller size. Maybe I'm a bit of an antiquarian in sensibility, but this would be my first choice over the 5159. And I'm sure a lot of folks watching probably agree that this was right the first time. It's also a little bit less common than the 5159. Now, that's all the Patek action we've got, but I'm happy to say we do have two different forms of Omega, and I'm going to go with these because I love both of these watches. One is vintage and one is vintage look. Now let's start with the vintage look and work our way back in time. In 2012, Omega, for the London Olympics, and you can see the London logo on the back, wants to remind you that Omega has been timing the Olympics for umpteen decades. This is a 1,948 piece limited edition, and it features the image of the 1948 Omega reference 2518, which was very similar to the 39 millimeter stainless steel watch you see right here. Small seconds, lovely leaf-style hands, quarter Arabics, and dart-style indices, applique on the original, applique on this watch. It's powered by a caliber 2895, which is based on the Omega caliber 2500 coaxial. Automatic winding, 48-hour power reserve. You'll also appreciate that this coaxial chronometer features an inventive case flank, much like the original watch from 1948, with double finish, both satin finish on its flanks and polish on its lugs. You could see, though, that the lugs are stepped up almost like a Lange, and I'll show you the Lange for comparison. This is an unusual look for an Omega, and you can see that exact same stepped out lug profile on this Lange 1. So Omega did things very differently for this limited edition London special, looking back to 1948, which of course was a Olympic year for Omega. Rolling over to the dial side, you don't get a plexiglass on this one, you get a sapphire crystal, and the watch is easy to wear. At 39 millimeters, this is what I call an all-arounder. It's neither a dress watch nor a sports watch. It finds itself somewhere in between. That said, my heart is probably with the true vintage piece, as this Omega Speedmaster Professional Mark II represents a 1969 launch. It is a tonneau case that was designed in the 60s, but is very much of the 70s. In fact, few shapes are more immediately identifiable with a decade. Now, it is powered by the Moonwatch caliber 861. Inside its case, you can still see the hippocampus, reminding you that the Speedmaster in 1957 started as part of the Seamaster collection. Manual wind, 48-hour power reserve, 21.6 beat rate. This movement is still flying as the 1861 with NASA today. Now you have a matte dial with original factory tritium, and you might be able to see the tritium signature. We have tritium hands as well as dial. Both are immaculate and original. You have an uncommon for today mineral crystal. The era of the plexiglass was a long one. The era of the sapphire is now several decades. The era of the mineral crystal was pretty much the 1970s and 80s, and then not even for all watches. The tachymeter is actually printed on the underside of the mineral crystal, so there's no faking this. The mineral crystal is original and in outstanding condition. The steel case is 42 millimeters wide, so it wears modern. The size is very contemporary today, and you can still see it has a good deal remaining of the radial lapping machine satin finish on the hoods of the lugs. Now, of course, there are marks on this case. We do not refinish vintage watches, so while the definition of every character line is sharp, you can see evidence of this watch having been worn, and I think most of us would agree it's only factory once and we wouldn't have it any other way. 45 millimeters lug to lug really surprised me. Which is to say, though it's a 42 and it's a chunky watch, it wears really easily on the wrist. Like the Ploprof, it's a big watch that's short lug to lug, so it wears compact across the wrist. And I have to say, all things considered, it's actually a little bit easier to wear than that vintage style Speedmaster I just showed you, because it is so short across the wrist. Look at that. I have about 5 millimeters of space on either side of my spindly 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Now, where will we conclude? Also, what have I missed? I always miss something, but not today. We have a combination of an all-arounder and a true sports watch. Launched in 2018, this is the Cartier Santos Large. 37.5 millimeters across, about 38.5 if you include the crown guards. The watch is 47 millimeters lug to lug and about 9.4 millimeters thick. Now you can see that the crystal is beautifully cambered to match the arc of the case, and the case back is curved, so the fit is superb. There is a brilliant quick release, removable bracelet system. The watch comes with a second set of straps, so you can dress it up with leather, or if you prefer, you can even get optional rubber to take the watch swimming. Internally, you get an ETA 2892 in high spec with a soft iron inner cage like a Milgauss for anti-magnetism and 100-meter water resistance so that you can take this watch swimming. Now, the quick release bracelet system is only half the equation, as the individual links that are removable and sizable can be removed using only your fingernail. I will see if I have enough fingernail to pull off the trick right here. I might not. I manicure myself on a daily basis for your viewing pleasure in the watch reviews. And you know what? Even close cropped, I was able to remove a link using this hand-sizable bracelet. That's right, a hand-sizable bracelet. You simply withdraw the link from the bracelet, and just like that, I have sized the bracelet, and you can't pull the pin out, so you can't lose it. It is brilliant, and you could see the tolerance of the pushers inside these removable links, so tight you can't even see them unless they've been depressed. That is the coolest sports watch launched last year. Likely the coolest sports watch launched in 2013 was the criminally underrated Blancpain Bathyscaphe. 43 millimeters and a bit more elemental than the reference 5015. This is the reference 5000. Mechanically identical to the 5015 we saw at the beginning of the show. This one's 43 millimeters rather than 45, and it's only 13.5, really 13.45 millimeters thick. Still 300 meters water resistant. It has all of the virtues of the 5015, but it lets you see that for which you've paid. If you're wondering what the 5015 movement looks like, this is reference 1315, because on the Bathyscaphe, it gets a silicone hairspring, so it needs no soft iron inner cage. You can see it. Beautifully executed with satin finished wheels, a lovely satin grain across the bridges, an engine turned base plate, mirrored anglage, and black polished screws. This is a high horology hand finished movement with 3 mainspring barrels, and yes, a 5-day power reserve. Let's hear the bezel of this one. Okay, sorry Rolex, but the folks from Les Brassus own this particular episode. Excellent bezel feel, ceramic bezel insert rather than sapphire on this one, with a sunburst gray dial, and as you can see, dimple style applique indices. The look here is designed to be a little bit more 1960s, 1970s than the 1950s styled 5015, and you can see that the watch even goes with a no crown profile and a big crown style architecture. So this one's actually a little bit easier to use with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands than the 5015. And I'll show you the two side by side. We don't generally line them up that often, but you can see the 5015 is a much, much larger watch. It's also a much more extravagant watch, all in high polish. So where do we end? Where do we go from there? We go back to Geneva and another independent, the house favorite here at Watchbox, FP Journe. Now, say what you will about the man himself, but the watches are brilliant. He draws the dial before he starts the engineering because he says if it doesn't look good, why proceed from there? You could have the best movement in the world and world-leading engineering, but if the watch is ugly, it wouldn't and shouldn't sell. Now you have a tourbillon with a 42-hour power reserve, a power reserve that reads 0, as in 0 hours since you wound it when it is fully energized. The half bridge for the balance is mirrored and rounded with a full black polish. There is a black polished wire-style filigree cage for the tourbillon. And as you can see, a deadbeat seconds system, which is driven by a remontoir d'égalité, which is a titanium spring in this application, a linear spring inside of a rose gold 18-karat movement bridges and plates, and you can see it releases its power in 1-second bursts. So regardless of whether the watch is fully wound or discharged down to about 12 hours of power remaining, you're going to get the same torque to the escapement and thus the same amplitude. Now, at about 12 hours remaining, it goes into sweep seconds mode because it doesn't have enough power to run the remontoir. You'll know because it will be in sweep seconds mode and you will see the power reserve approaching the end. Wind it back up and get that constant force device and tourbillon combination. An FP Journe original, for he was the first to combine these two. 40 millimeters in platinum and nice and slender. The watch is only about 10 millimeters thick, which is exemplary for a watch of this type with several complications. Again, full platinum with a solid gold movement. It feels eyes closed like a bigger watch, though it wears easily, and you can see on my smaller wrist it is perfectly tailored. Friends and fellows, I have one more show for you. I have one more star for today, and this is probably the closest thing to a de Bethune rival on the table. Independent watchmaking, this is Ressence of Antwerp, Belgium and Switzerland, designed in Belgium and made in Switzerland. This is the Type 1 Slim, a 2019 novelty featuring Ressence's signature regulator planetary orbital dial. Now the watch is slimmer than before because the base movement, once an ETA 2824, which is 4.6 millimeters thick, is now an ETA 2892, which is 3.6 millimeters thick. As a result, the 42 millimeter titanium cushion profile case, one might even call it a little bit of a tonneau, is now 10.9 millimeters thick. It sits low on the wrist and it glows like a torch at night. You have a little indicator for the day of the week. So you could see it is Monday, Tuesday, and we're right at the end of Tuesday. And I will show you as I turn the time using the caseback adjustment system. You can wind the watch and set it using the caseback, though it is an automatic, so you don't need to wind it full time. That feature debuted on the Type 1 Squared, but you'll note as I adjust the time forward, the hour display coasts toward midnight as the radial minutes display circulates the dial. Now when I get to 12, I will demonstrate to you how you know it is 12 midnight. Now it is 12 midnight, and you know that because the day of the week indicates we are at the turn of 2 days. We're at the end of Tuesday, the beginning of Wednesday, and that is how you use the Ressence Type 1 Slim. This example, an exquisite ostrich strap, a very different look, wears distinctively on the wrist. It won't be mistaken for anything else. Ressence, de Bethune, Moser, and even HYT perennially compete to be my favorite independent, and I'm not going to choose today, guys. You reserve that right. Price is in the description. Contact me, Mosso at thewatchbox.com with sales or inquiries regarding any of these watches. Thanks so much. I hope the rest of your Sunday is a blast. Time out, Tim out. Thank you for logging on.